Hi guys, and welcome to the video. So the Orville has returned for its third season, and for a season opening episode, this was, in my opinion, quite honestly, fantastic. So if you're new here, I just want to say welcome. The way I structure my review videos is I give a breakdown of the episode. I talk about things that I liked, things that I disliked, and then I'll give you my overall thoughts at the end of the video. So just to give you fair warning, there will be spoilers from here on out. So it's been a long time coming. I've been looking forward to the Orville returning. I have been a little worried that potentially it's going to take a bit of a tonal shift in much the same way that Star Trek has. However, this episode proved me wrong, and it did not disappoint. The writing was on point, the direction was on point, the acting was on point. The effects, though at times you can tell it's very heavy CGI oriented, the effects were just fine, really. Some impressive scenes and a lot of generally sci-fi fans like to call ship porn. Now, the Orville, in my opinion, is a spiritual successor to Star Trek, and it's actually become a lot better than what Star Trek has become. And this first episode, for me, solidified that opinion. So the episode opens with a tribute to Norm Macdonald. May he rest in peace. Thank you for all of the entertainment that you have brought us thus far. The character of Yaphet is a fantastically written character and quite an amusing one at that. I don't know how much of this season that Yaphet will be appearing in. I don't know how much of it was shot. However, whilst he's here, I'm going to do my best to make the most of the character. This episode centers around the subject of suicide. A very difficult subject for a lot of people, and it does it in a very tasteful way. So the episode opens with the scene from the preview or the mini trailer. It's the Kalon battle, and we see Marcus Finn running through the ship, trying not to get sucked out into space. A very action-heavy scene. And very, very impressively filmed as well. He makes his way to his brother Ty, and Isaac walks into the room, and we get that little jump scare with Isaac's face changing. But it's all a dream. Marcus wakes up, and he's clearly still traumatized from what happened in the previous season. The crew are viewing Isaac in very much a negative light. He is obviously the face of the Kalon. For a lot of people, what happened in the previous season is still quite raw. And for a lot of them, there's a lot of hatred there for Isaac and what he represents. We meet a new character. I believe she's a new regular on the show, Charlie Burke, Ensign Charlie Burke, and she is sitting with some of her colleagues, and Isaac asks if it's okay to join them. They reluctantly say, sure, okay. Isaac sits down and they all promptly leave. However, Charlie Burke returns and explains to Isaac that she had a friend aboard a ship that was destroyed, and that friend sacrificed her own life. We actually see that in the episode. She sacrificed her own life to save the life of Charlie Burke. And Charlie tells Isaac that she wishes that he could feel the guilt and remorse that he technically should feel. All this is overheard by Tala, and it's referenced again later in the episode. Isaac returns to the lab only to find the word murderer has been painted on the wall or on the series of consoles. And then we cut to credits. The credits roll by, and the Orville is in for a refit, obviously after the events of the previous season. Needs serious upgrading. The crew are investigating the graffiti that was left in the astrophysics lab. Tala reveals that she overheard Burke talking to Isaac, and she's pulled in for questioning. Now, what I like about the Orville and a lot of older Star Trek is that the command structure remains intact, and no matter what someone is feeling, they don't nihilistically and childishly bark at their superior officer. Although we know that Charlie has a lot of strong emotion surrounding Isaac, she still requests permission to speak freely, which is not something we see in these types of shows anymore. Certainly not New Trek. Obviously, I've reviewed a lot of New Trek, and it's not something that crops up an awful lot. In fact, a lot of the writing, it would appear, is written by people with the minds of children. However, this show is not. So Charlie informs the captain that, a lot of people are afraid or angry with the view that Isaac should not have been fully reinstated. Malloy flies in on a new, I believe it's a new type of fighter. It just looks like a mini Orville with a much sleeker, sharper point. To be fair, generally speaking, with ship design, the Orville is cut and paste. And where I was critical about that with regards to Picard, there's no reason to believe that the Union ships shouldn't all look the same. If it works, I think they just differ in size. Whereas in Star Trek Picard, set in a universe where you've got all this variety of different styles of ship, Star Trek Picard just copied and pasted 300 ships at the end of its first season, which I thought was ridiculous. Anyway, I digress. Malloy flies in on a new sleeker type of fighter shuttle, and he speaks to Charlie. And I was quite surprised that he sided with Charlie on the anti-Isaac bandwagon. It's revealed through investigation that Marcus Finn, Dr. Finn's son, who had the dream at the beginning of the episode, is responsible for the vandalism and the word murderer. He's questioned by his mother. During a lot of the back and forth between Claire and her children, I find remarkable parallels between conversations with my children now, some of which are heading straight and fast into their teenage years, where there's a lot of attitude that comes back and forth. So it's relatable for me in many respects like that. Claire arranges for Isaac to come and apologise to Marcus with the best of intentions, but it's not a really well thought out idea, to be fair. So Isaac apologises, and Marcus clearly isn't impressed by that, and he states to Isaac, "I wish you were dead." Now Isaac returns to the astrophysics lab, compiles some data, speaks a final report, and then in his final log he wishes the Finn family all the best, and takes his own life. He overloads an EMP device and essentially fries his own circuits, and he commits suicide. So Isaac is discovered in the lab. They determine that he did in fact take his own life. They don't really understand why he did it. The episode then goes through several scenes of how people are dealing with the fact that Isaac is gone and he took his own life. We see a nice scene and quite thought-provoking scene between Claire and Ty, her younger son, who's got a simulation of Isaac up and running. And he says, "I just wanted to talk to Isaac." And Claire points out that what I imagine would be quite an interesting problem that people would develop is, people in grief, they simulate the person who has passed, and they find it difficult to move on. It actually interferes with the grieving process, with the stages of grief, and they develop serious problems. And then she says that you can't do it. It's going to cause more problems than you think. Ty leaves quite upset, and then Claire activates a simulation where her and Isaac had their first date. And she breaks down into tears, and I thought that was quite moving. The ship is getting ready to launch, and I thought Yaphit's in the spacesuit, and he's made himself into the spacesuit. I can't remember whether I've actually seen that on the Orville before, but I thought that was fantastic. And he gets out the spacesuit, it just drops into a pair of clothes. It's literally like he's just perfectly fit into a spacesuit, which I love the character of Yaphit, and it's such a shame about Norm. He really brought the character to life. He was fantastic. Is a fantastic choice for Yaphit. He really did a great job. He will be sorely missed. We cut to a scene where John has just finished having I hate to use a British term, a bit of hanky-panky with with a fellow crewmate. I'm not exactly sure who she is, but she's an alien, and she is just spiny. Her skin resembles that of the tumble dryer balls that you get to, soften your clothes and whatnot. And she's spiny all over. And he gets off of her, and she says, "Are you okay?" And he goes, "I think my hips are bleeding a little, or my hips are very sore, but other than that, it's like, ooh, yeah, chafing issues." But it's a really nice scene. They're discussing suicide and different attitudes towards suicide, and whether or not it's a personal choice or whether it's a selfish choice, and whether or not it's right or wrong. And I think that's what I love about this show, and love about classic Trek in general, is that the writers don't lecture you on what they believe is right. They always give you multiple points of view, so you can relate to it and you can understand and form your own opinion on it. And there's a lot of that in this episode about a lack of information and how it can affect decision making. How people who take their own lives don't really consider the future or the impact of those that they leave behind. A very, very touching message. This is certainly what I took away from the episode. It's at that point that John gets a revelation that Isaac may have a redundant memory core that hasn't been fried, because it's possible that in the event of a system shut down or a corruption, there's always a backup. So he rushes off to engineering. He realizes that he may in fact be able to revive Isaac, but there is a catch. In order to do this, it's a very delicate procedure. They need someone who has experience with fourth dimensional thinking and and the correct reaction times and such. It turns out that the only crew member that can help is Charlie, who obviously is going to be resistant to helping to revive Isaac. The captain sits down and has a conversation with her, and she's outright refusing to help because she doesn't want to help a murderer. And the captain quite rightly points out that, look, we all lost somebody, we all lost friends, we lost family in this conflict with the Kaelon. You do not have a monopoly on grief. We are all grieving, but we have to try and save a crew member, who is no longer with us, and we have a chance to do that. You thinking you have a monopoly on grief is starting to get really old. And that is, again, a comparison I will make to New Trek. New Trek is obviously very nihilistic and grief-driven, and it's just people pouring out their emotions with no structure to it, and it's very manipulative. Shows like the Orville don't do that. He's right, she doesn't have a monopoly on grief. Everyone's experienced grief and loss, with regards to the recent conflict. She is very reluctant to help. She will not help. They are interrupted by an attack by a Kaelon ship that intercepts them out of nowhere. We end up with a gas giant scene. Now, I criticised previous episode of The Strange New Worlds for being massively derivative of another Star Trek episode. Turns out the derivative of many Star Trek episodes. But this, it's really weird, because if that episode would have aired this week, or this episode would have aired last week, the comparisons would just be there. It's almost as if the writers of Strange New Worlds are listening to the writer's room of the Orville at this point. But it's literally a 5-minute scene in this gas giant where obviously the Orville has been attacked. They run to this gas giant, and Mercer's plan is to create a decoy. So an explosion that will make it appear as if the Orville has been destroyed. So the Kaelon leave. Mercer orders that all the torpedoes get loaded onto the shuttle. The shuttle leaves and explodes in the atmosphere of the gas giant, allowing the Kaelon to think, the Orville's been destroyed, move on, and the Orville gets out of the gas giant. At that point, Mercer orders Charlie to go and help John in engineering to revive Isaac. She refuses the order and is promptly relieved of duty. Again, something that really doesn't happen in New Trek. No one has a respect for the chain of command in New Trek, but in the Orville, in this show, they do. And I really like that. I really like that structure is there. It makes it a more believable world. So Burke is in the mess hall and Marcus comes to see her and says, yeah, I hate Isaac for what he did. I wished him dead and it's my fault that he is. You know, yes, he was angry with him, but he didn't want him to die. And that seems to convince Burke to go and revive Isaac. So Burke works with Lamar and Isaac is revived. He's brought back. Burke states to Isaac that she didn't do it for him. Isaac is sitting with Dr. Finn and he reveals that he ended his own life or his own existence because crew efficiency wouldn't be ideal, because crew efficiency would be worse if he was around, because people would be too busy hating him, despising him, wouldn't be focused on their job, so the ship wouldn't run as efficiently and could potentially be in danger. So it's a very sort of artificial and cold, logical reason for Isaac doing what he did. Claire's trying to find some emotional reason for what he did. Perhaps he was too heavily chastised by the crew that he felt, you know, that it was something that he just couldn't continue doing. But of course, he's an artificial life form. He doesn't experience emotion. So there was a very cold, logical reason for him doing what he did. And Claire makes an absolutely brilliant point about suicide and about how people don't really consider the future. They only think of the present, and that all problems can be solved with time and the people around us. And then the episode closes, and that's it. That's the rundown of the episode. I do hope that you've watched this episode before coming here to see my thoughts on it. So what are my thoughts on this episode? Well, it hit very close to home in some respects. I don't know how many of you have lost someone to suicide. I'm sure a lot of us have known someone who has taken their own life. It is an extremely painful subject, and I think that the episode covers it very well. Although there is a get out for Isaac, he does come back. It's a story about what we leave behind when we do commit to that and carry it out. It's about what we leave behind, who we leave behind, and their struggles. It is explored, that, you know, the difference in opinion and the different attitudes towards it. Like I said earlier, is it a personal choice? Is it a selfish choice? Is it necessary? And the episode allows you to walk away from it doing what I think Star Trek always did, and that's approach it from your point of view. Never once lectured you on whether it was right or wrong. It was an open discussion on this subject. And that's what I think the Orville does very well with its stories. Now, whether or not you're a fan of Seth MacFarlane or you don't like Seth MacFarlane's work, I think the Orville, for me personally, the Orville is spiritually a successor to Star Trek. Star Trek has gone down a very different path, a very dark, nihilistic path. It has become something that very different to what Star Trek originally was, and I have to say I prefer the Orville these days. I do hope Star Trek gets back on track. I've been a Star Trek fan for many years, most of my life, but I think the Orville has done a great job of telling stories, episodic stories, and approaching different points of view, allowing people. And I think that's where the Orville is a lot better. It allows people to make up their own minds, rather than what Star Trek does now is lecture people and say, this is right, this is wrong, you're wrong if you think that, you're wrong if you think that. Was this a happy episode? Not really. There wasn't much levity in it. It was quite serious, but it wasn't depressing. It was sad, and then it was uplifting, and it made you feel everything along the way. It doesn't need to depress you, and it did make you feel sad, but it didn't make you feel depressed. It made you think, and that's what I like about this show. It made me think. As some of you may or may not know, the Orville is very special to me. It allowed me to have a very special final bond with my father before he passed away. He's been gone about 2 years now. I sat him down and told him about the absolute state of Star Trek, because he hadn't kept up with any of it since the end of Enterprise. I don't think he even went through Enterprise. I remember sitting down and having a conversation about, about the state of Star Trek, and he was absolutely gobsmacked. But I says, if you're looking for a great show, here's the Orville. I gave him the season 1 DVD, and he absolutely loved it. He rang me up a few days later, laughing his ass off. It was so funny. He said, thank you so much for giving me this gift of this show. It is so funny, and it is so wonderful, and the stories are fantastic. It felt like I was he said it felt like I was 40 again. Bless him. And that is what the Orville means to me. Is it a biased opinion? Probably, but I know that the Orville has had some lackluster episodes before. I'm not painting this show as absolutely incredible, but for me, it's really special, and it's really well done. This episode, as a season opener, was a very powerful episode for me, and and spoke to me in many ways. I can only recommend that you go and watch this show. It's been a real pleasure to see it back on the screens. So, I mean, that's my opinion. That's what I thought of the episode, and that's pretty much it from me. So if you are new here and you like what you see, then please hit that subscribe button. That would really help me out. And if you liked this video, hit that like button. Until the next video, please look after yourselves, look after one another. Take care. Bye-bye for now.
I need the silence, stop the violence of the war in my head. Time's the healer, the eraser of all done and said. And as I fall back to my shelter, I know I'll only find peace in your smile.